welcome to day 3 of the Ragamuffin photo challenge. Hey, we're halfway there. I hope you've been enjoying the challenge so far. If you haven't had a chance to submit all the assignments yet, please don't let that hold you back. Totally okay if you submit them a day or two late. I would much rather you take the time to have that little photo session with your pet than feel like you have to just pick a random photo from your archives. That being said, I have absolutely loved seeing all of the assignments come in from everyone's beautiful submissions. So well done, all the challenges out there. It's been fantastic seeing everyone's work. Today you're going to learn about natural lighting. Lighting is everything in photography. The word quite literally means drawing with light, and having an understanding and appreciation for light is a crucial part of becoming a better photographer. Today I'm going to teach you about how to recognize different qualities of light and also the direction of light, and how you can apply that towards improving your own pet photography. When we refer to natural lighting, we're talking about light that comes from the sun as opposed to any artificial light source. And there are so many different types of natural lighting and effects that you can create using natural light. We've got everything from side light, backlight, dappled light. We've got bokeh, rim light and flare. You can change the whole look of your photos by creating silhouettes or shooting at night. Today we're going to discuss the two main categories of natural light and how you can start to recognize them. We've got hard light and soft light. Hard light is a strong light that shines directly onto your subject. So think if you're out in the middle of the day and you've got a really bright sun shining on your dog, or you have the lamp turned on and it's shining directly onto your cat, that's a strong hard light, and it often will create some really harsh shadows and a lot of contrast between the highlights, or the brighter areas of your photos, and the shadows, which are the darker areas of your photos. Soft light, as you've probably guessed, is the total opposite of hard light. It's when the light source is filtered through something before it hits your subject. So think under the shade of a tree, or on an overcast day, or sitting by the window with some soft window light coming in. Soft light is much easier to handle because it doesn't have that strong contrast between the highlights and shadows. It's more of an overall gentle look to your photos. There are pros and cons to both hard light and soft light, and they each have their own unique look. Hard light, for example, makes it much easier to emphasize the shininess in your pet's fur, especially if you have a black pet. It can also be much easier to focus, especially for action pet photography, if you have a hard light. That's because your lens's focusing system really relies on contrast. So the more contrast you have in there, the easier it is for the lens to quickly lock in and focus on your subject. It's often easier to capture some really bright blue skies with hard light, especially if you have the sun positioned behind you. So that's normally the reason why I would utilize hard light during a photo session, is if I want some really bright, crisp colors and I want that blue sky in the background. However, hard light is really difficult light to work with because you not only have to be aware of the level of contrast in your image, you also have to keep an eye on any shadows. So if you have the sun position behind you, for example, you're going to have to be very aware of whether or not your own body or your hand or your camera is casting a shadow onto your pet's face, which will happen. I typically recommend getting down quite low when you're working with hard light, because that way you can get the light shining above your head and onto your pet's face, and you might have to find yourself wrangling in some pretty awkward positions. Soft light, on the other hand, is much easier to work with. You don't have any of those strong directional shadows to worry about, so you can just focus on your photography, your exposure, your posing, your pet. You don't have to worry as much about the lighting. Soft light is also a little bit easier on the eyes. Now, it's totally personal preference whether or not you like that sort of punchy, bright, contrasty look of hard light, but you prefer the softer, possibly more vintage, more gentle aesthetic of a softer filtered light. And you will definitely find that soft light is much easier to work with. So I tend to recommend anyone starting out in pet photography, head for the shade. If in doubt, head for the shade. Obviously, if you want to make a hero out of the light, you want to make a statement of the light and utilize hard light, go ahead. But if you're just focusing on taking a photograph of your pet, if you're in that soft filtered light, by a window light, for example, under the shade of your porch or under the shade of a tree, you find that much easier to expose. That being said, it is slightly more difficult to focus with a softer light because, again, you have that less contrast for the focusing system to lock onto. However, as long as it's not too dark, you should still be fine to focus in soft light. Now on to part 2 of this lesson about the direction of light. It's really important that you start to understand and look for what direction your light source is coming from. Now on a really overcast day, this might be really hard to distinguish, but most of the time you can see, even if it's a soft light, whether or not there's a direction. So for example, while I'm standing here from the window, the majority of the light is coming in from the window. As a general rule, I suggest positioning your pet so they are facing that soft light. Rules are meant to be broken. If you want to play around with side light or backlight, go straight ahead. But as a general rule, positioning their pet so they're facing that light source will give a nice even lighting across their face, and it gives you the most light to be able to capture, which is particularly helpful with darker furred pets. In hard light, it's usually very noticeable which direction the light is coming from, so it's quite easy to position your pet towards that light. In soft light, it's a little bit more tricky, but with some practice, you'll start to notice the direction of the light. My clients will often see me holding my hand up so I can see where the most light is shining on my hand. As you can see, as I start to move it that way, that gets to that little bit of shadow there. So for example, in this photo of Lyra, it's taken in soft light. There's no strong shadows or anything like that. But the main source of the light was behind her because she was facing into some bushes. So she was facing into the darkness. By just turning her around, she's literally in the same spot, but just turned 180 here, you can see that there's a lot more light on her face. This is particularly noticeable when you look into her eyes. See the light source reflected in her eyes? That's called a catch light. Catch lights are really important in portrait photography, whether you're photographing humans or animals. So you always want to be looking out for catch lights, the little light source reflected in your pet's eye. Without catch lights, eyes can look really dull and lifeless. Take this snapshot of Lyra for example. It's taken late at night right here in my office, and I've just got the overhead light on. And the effect is that her eyes look really dark. You can't see any of the detail in her eyes. All I had to do is stand up a little bit higher so her chin was facing up towards the light source, and suddenly we have a little bit of catch lights. Now these are just crappy photos, but I wanted to really emphasize the importance and the difference that having those little catch lights makes. Again, in this photo, I think with and without catch lights makes a huge difference in the overall sparkle of the photo. The direction of soft light is even more important when you're photographing your pet inside the house because you're only relying on the window. You don't have an entire sky worth of light to light up your image. So definitely make sure you're always positioning your pet so that they're facing towards a window. I recommend you have your back towards the window, and that will give you a nice even light across them. I actually have an entire free video lesson on using natural light inside your home for pet photography, so I will include a link to that in the 5-day challenge website. Assignment 3 is all about, you guessed it, natural lighting. First, you need to decide whether or not you're going to be team hard light or team soft light. Totally up to you. They have two very different aesthetic qualities, but it's your choice as a photographer. So then I want you to have a little hunt around your home or your local environment to find spots where you can photograph either with soft light or with hard light. You probably find much more hard light during the middle of the day when the sun is high in the sky, and you'll generally find more soft light towards the start or the end of the day, where we call golden hour, that hour and a half before sunset. Next, I want you to take a photo of your pet showcasing either hard light or soft light, and keep an eye out to make sure they've got catch lights in their eyes. As always, post your photo to the challenge and leave at least one comment on someone else's photo. Enjoy today's assignment, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Bye!